Hello
Hello,
and
hello, hello.
welcome.
Hello.
Um,
See you.
yeah, it's nice to see you too, Robert. So today we have our special guest, Robert Marshall, on our call, and we would like him to introduce himself, please.
Yes. Hi, I'm Robert Marshall. I have known Padme for it's like a year now. And in the world of internet, like we know each other, but we've never met in real life. So we know each other really well. We studied together, and I think we both got certified at the same time. And so we're certified life coaches at Jay Shetty. And I think it's vibes, as the kids say. We have good vibes, and we've continued on multiple communities together. So yeah, I'm very happy to be here. Very happy to be here with you.
I'm happy to have you, and I love that, as the kids say. Uh,
Yes, because I'm
so,
very old.
um, I would wager that you're not quite as old as me, but possibly.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't crack, so you'll never know. You'll never know.
Yeah, it's all
Uh,
it's all relative, right?
uh,
So the other day, I believe it was maybe a little over a week ago, I attended a workshop that you gave on something you call Win the Hour. And I was excited to share that with our audience, and so that they might have access to you as well if it sounds like something that would be interesting to them. So could you tell us a little bit about what Win the Hour is?
yes, yes. It's win your hour.
Oh,
Probably.
sorry.
No, 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 no. It's win your hour, and it has been my guiding light for the last 6 months or so in terms of personal productivity. So, a little bit about me. I worked in the corporate side, both in the UK and the US for the past 35 years or so. And the last job that I had was leading a team of project managers. So I work in the project and program management field. I led a team of 50 plus program managers at the New York Times. Prior to that, I ran a team of 30 program managers, all on the digital side for Fox. And then prior to that, I worked in client side. So I've been pretty much focused on productivity of myself and groups and teams and large groups and even organizations for the last 20 or 30 years or so. Ridiculous amount of time. And then as of almost 2 years to the day, I decided to leave corporate America and strive out on my own. And it was really chasing the 80/20 rule. I love working with people. That's why I got into project and program management. And the higher that you get in a company, the more senior you get, then the less it becomes about the people. And that's what I found. And so instead of being 80% about people and 20% about the other stuff, it became 20% about the business and 80 and it became, sorry, 80% about the business and 20% about people. And that just didn't sit well with me. And so I then took some time out and I decided I was going to become a life coach. So I studied, got certified, and became an entrepreneur. And what I found then was that I became the world's worst entrepreneur, which really surprised me. It didn't dawn on me that I might become the world's worst entrepreneur, and that was very confusing to me for a long time. And I've now focused on that, and hence the program Win Your Hour, which has helped me get back to some form of rigor and regulation.
Got you. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, that's pretty profound. I find it interesting that you went from being able to project manage such large projects and large groups of people to then feeling like you're the worst
Yeah.
entrepreneur. Like, what would you say is the difference? Do you think that, like, what do you think is so different about being an entrepreneur versus managing large groups of people?
After lots of soul searching, I definitely think that it's mindset. It's a lot to do with mindset. When the priorities are set externally, then I will meet those priorities, right? When there's an organization that needs something, a client that needs something, a team that needs something, I would then I'm able to focus in a different way. And I'm able to sort of take a step back and I'm able to think about that group and what they all need to do and keep that in my head. Um, I was also a late diagnosed ADHD person. So when I was 48, a couple of years ago, I was diagnosed with ADHD, and it brought lots of things into focus. Sort of how in my real life, in my social life, I am so utterly inept at keeping things in my head and following through on tasks and starting one thing and then stopping. Um, so a little funny moment was when I had all this time and I said to my wife, I was like, yeah, I'm going to do stuff around the house. And then she sort of sat me down and she said, I beg of you, please only do one room at a time. Because she's seen me for all these years when I get into like I'm cleaning today, I'm organizing today, and just like moving things around. And again, 90% of it would be moved into a new place and tidy, and 10% would just be random. And she's like, why are you just moving chaos? And it was probably just the best reflection of how my brain looks at any one time. You sort of walk into a room and you go, what was I doing here? And why am I holding this thing? I'm going to put it down, but there's something else to do. I'm going to go do that. That's the way that my brain works.
Got you. Yes, I can relate. Oh, that's great. So we're here today to talk about overwhelm,
Yeah.
right? And would you say that that's something that has also played a part in making it challenging to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think probably one of the greatest challenges I face is procrastination. And I believe that procrastination for me is like a mental response to overwhelm.
Mm,
Right? It's like I'm going to do the most comforting thing. I'm going to go and watch Netflix. I'm going to go and play with Lego, or I'm going to do something to distract myself rather than think about the challenges that I have and how I'm going to succeed and how I'm going to overcome. Right? It's like again that difference of before doing a project in the old days, I'd map the whole project out from beginning to end and what every day would look like and who was there and how many resources, all that kind of stuff. And when it came to myself, I just stopped having a plan. It was literally, I would just think about the next thing to do and the next thing to do. And then if I got nervous about the next thing to do, would it work? Would it not work? Then I would suddenly become like overwhelmed, and then I would find myself procrastinating, and because I have the procrastinating habit. And so then I would just find myself, and the thing with the procrastination habit is that where I used to get external prioritization and external remembering of like, hey, you've got to do this thing by this date, it kind of becomes externalized. It comes outside of myself. And so I have a deadline and I know I've got it, but I'm kind of not tracking it and it's not really in my mind until it's a day away or a week away. And then suddenly I like, oh my goodness, I've got so much to do. Can't believe I can do it. And then my mind then triggers into an action response and then away I go. But that's always the pattern. It's always like procrastinate, it's like think something through, find it challenging or chewy or in some way triggering, and then find myself sat in front of the TV. And it really became it became part of my MO to start battling procrastination if I want to get good at being an entrepreneur. And so I worked with a friend of mine. My best friend is a she's also a head of program and program project management out in LA. And she became my accountability partner. And there is no one greater to have as your accountability partner than someone who's in the project management or program management field, because it's always really, really great questions. Just like, well, what if you haven't done that, why haven't you done that? And when are you going to do it? And you're going to do it on Monday. And do you have enough time for that? So it was great having that reflection, and I've tried to simulate that in Win Your Hour with other people. It's like, how can we think about time differently? How can we think about productivity differently? How can we think about procrastination and deal with it differently?
I love that. I can relate on so many levels. I end up with the same issues with where I get overwhelmed and then it feels like paralysis. It's like the overwhelm just feels like it's just like this weight that I can't shake. and then it's like there's nothing to do but get in bed and turn Netflix on, right? Yeah.
Right.
And so,
Right. Right. And then and regret. And you're like,
right,
I'm
right.
really
And then lay
good.
there and feel bad about yourself because you're not being productive.
Yeah.
And I found myself similarly when I was working with other people, and especially in the role of an administrative assistant, I did so well because it was like somebody had a need.
Right.
I'm used to jumping when somebody has a need and fill that need. Oh, I'll take care of that. I can help with that. And then when that's not there, when the accountability is only to yourself, as another person who's trying to be an entrepreneur here, right? Like it's a whole different ball game. There's nobody else coming to you with a need. It's you're the one with the need. You're the one with something you want to create, and you have to motivate yourself to create that every day.
That's right.
And I loved your presentation on Win Your Hour because it really broke it down in a way that was very not only bite-sized, but also which takes away some of that overwhelm feeling, but also really realistic and kind to yourself. And
Right.
so I would really encourage anybody to take your workshop on Win Your Hour because that it was a beautiful presentation and it made a lot of sense. I, for one, have a really hard time with to-do lists,
Right.
as I think I was sharing with you at that presentation, because for some reason my brain, when I write down a list, my brain goes, okay, done,
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. I've
right?
solved it. I've written it down.
Right. I've written it down. That means I'm not going to forget it, and therefore I can put it out of my mind. But once it's
Yeah.
out of my mind, chances are I'm never going to go back to it because there's so many things all the time in my mind going, you need to do this, you need to do that. And the more that's there, the less likely I am to complete it. And yet, when I put it on a piece of paper, the only things I might complete are the things that are not on the paper, but still in the mind. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right. But when you break it down and in a way that's bite size, I think that's really the key for me is making it bite size so that, I love that concept of just like, okay, just this 1 hour,
Right.
right? Like I'm
One.
just going to focus on this 1 hour. I'm going to do this one thing and get it, make some progress on it in this 1 hour.
Yeah. That's it. I'm not fighting with all of the things in my mind. I'm not fighting with what's going to happen next. It's literally I have 1 hour and I have these two priorities. Am I going to get them done? Yes or no? But it helps get you into that mindset. And I think it also I would say, dare say for me, it kind of programs the brain as well, which we can go into too.
Okay, fantastic. I look forward to that. So, um, yeah, I mean, I think we've really covered how this has the concept of overwhelm has impacted both of us
Yeah.
in a pretty profound way.
And
Um,
I also
yeah, go ahead.
I also have the it's funny because I believe that we shared a moment of overwhelm because we both studied together. And then for some reason it felt like we had a lot longer than we did. And I think it was because it's like, this phase is going to end, and so here is another phase. So, but then we were given a message, and it was like, "Hey guys, so really good to see that next Friday you'll be completely done with all your coursework." And I was like, what do
Right.
you mean? What do you mean all of my coursework? I'm done with it next Friday. And it was dropped so casually, and but like a you could see everyone on the screen just be like, what do you mean? And so we went back to the original notes, and it was like, yeah, basically, so we had 2 weeks to suddenly learn 40 hours worth of videos, and that was probably my greatest moment of overwhelm in the past, in the longest time I could think of, because immediately again I went to my program management mind. So I created myself a spreadsheet and I wrote down every single every single module and every single video, and then I spent on every single thing you'd have to do, and I had myself a great list. Like, here is my list. Okay, now if I have, I'm going to try and get through as many of these today, and so I'd create a big study block, and it'd be like, okay, so I'm a full-time coach, so okay, I've got from 9 till 2:30 when the kids come home, and obviously I would start learning or sit down to learn at 2 p.m. with lots of guilt, lots of frustration and stuff. And so like that was the thing. It's like do that for a couple of days, and then finally it was like, what's happening? I even started to try and cheat. I was like, I'm gonna find the minimum number or the shortest videos I could find, and I did tricks like that. And actually, the way that broke me out of that was the content because it was Jay, and we were going through, learning about, how to be the best life coach you can be, and there's lots of learnings you can have. And then it sort of struck me at one point that like this is wisdom, that we're trying to get, and there is no those two things do not work well. Trying to absorb wisdom with a tight schedule at numbers doesn't work, and then you add on an ADHD brain, and I would literally watch every video. It would take me 2 hours to watch a 1 hour video because I would make notes. That distracts my body. I make notes, and then I would watch the videos, and then I would watch them again, maybe because it was like I don't remember, like you'd hear something and it would hit you, and you'd be like, "This really means something to me. This really matters to me. This is great." And then you'd watch it again to think, "Oh, how could I help someone else with this?" And at some point, I was like, "This is what this is about wisdom, and I can't do it in a rush schedule." So I was like, "Forget it. I'm not going to rush. I'm actually going to change my mindset." And changing my mindset really fixed everything for me.
So, how would you say you changed your mindset?
I think so. The way that it happened for me was that at one point I sat down and I was trying to rush, and I was trying to say to myself, only watch this video once, or don't stop the video, or don't redo it. You don't have the time. And at some point I said to myself, rushing, I think I did that maybe for a day and just did not absorb anything. Right, I was able to tick off my box. Yep, I've done these three things. I've seen these videos, modules. It's like, but I don't remember anything about those modules. I don't know anything about them. So the mindset was like, this is wisdom and I need to absorb it. And so if I'm going to be late, I'm going to be late, but I need to like absorb this and go back to studying. And when I did that, my sort of, my chest opened and my shoulders went back, and then I got it done, because I was like, I didn't want to then procrastinate from studying. I wanted to study because it was wisdom that felt good, and my momentum had started rolling.
Okay, all
Uh,
right, that makes a lot of sense.
how did you survive?
So, first of all, I was still working a full-time job at that time. And so, and full disclosure, I don't know for sure if I have ADHD, but I have spoken to my therapist because I think I might. And we had a short discussion about it, and she agreed that I might, but we haven't actually done the full testing. So I hesitate to say, oh yeah, I have ADHD too. But from everything that you're describing and things that other people with ADHD are described, like I can relate way too much. Um, and so I think it helped me that I was still working, and a lot of the work that I was doing didn't take a lot of brain power. So I could watch not the modules, but like the, what's it called? Like the extra learning, the
Right, yeah,
webinars and stuff, I was able to watch those and absorb them while I was working. So
I
you
know.
know how you were saying you had to make notes and stuff in order to keep your brain engaged. I also like sometimes need to do like two things at once in order to properly pay attention or absorb things because otherwise I get like distracted too easily. Um, and so that I think helped me because then I wasn't like pausing and I just would listen to it while I'm doing something that doesn't take a lot of brain power.
Nice.
And so I think that helped me get through them a lot. And then I think for me also deadlines. while it puts me in a complete state of panic, it
Right.
is a way to get things done. So
Right.
if I have a very real deadline, like it doesn't work very well for me to give myself artificial deadlines. But if I have a real deadline, like this absolutely somebody else is saying this has to be done by this time, or even I can do it, like I've learned now with my business that if I like I set a date and advertise that I'm going to do a workshop on
Right.
this date, then I have a real deadline and I better get that workshop ready and done by that time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And like there's no changing that. So I think when that, when they were like, oh, you have like a week and a half or 2 weeks left before the deadline, that really, then I was like, okay, got to do it. What I've hated about that is that it's so frustrating. Like when I was working, for instance, I would have so many things on my plate and I would have like, I'd be working on the things, but I would often like get distracted by emails or just go do the thing that's the easiest instead of the most important or most urgent. And then the things that were like, that felt like hard, I wouldn't I wouldn't do those until, the last minute, like a
Right.
half hour before a meeting, I would prepare for the meeting.
Yeah.
And then I would be in a complete state of panic. And I was talking to my daughter one day and saying to her, like, why is it? Because she's been diagnosed with ADHD. And I'm like, do you experience this where like you have to be in a complete state of panic in
Yeah.
order to prioritize something and get it done? And she's like, yeah, I know. Like it completely sucks.
Yeah.
And
There's some great
it's
TED
like,
Talks out there. There are some
yeah,
great talks about it.
it's like, it's great in the sense that now I'm getting it done, but it's like for the nervous system, it's intense. It's like
Yeah.
you're either bored and spaced out and not able to focus, or you're like, oh my God,
Right.
like, what's gonna happen? It's gonna be off with my head if I don't get you know, in a
And
half
then
an hour, and really it needs 3 hours to do it. And then,
that's it. That's it. And it's so the thing about what's interesting is that it's so hard to get going. But when you get going, then suddenly you're a machine. And
mm-hmm,
these things are like this is never difficult. This was never difficult. I could have done this anytime, blah blah blah. It's so funny that just that there's the hump that you've got to get over. And then once you get over it, then like, okay, now I'm in here and I'm zoning in. And I don't know what else I'm zoning out because this is what I have to do right now.
right. And you can do that, or at least I've experienced I can do that when I have that pressure.
Yeah,
And um even if that pressure, like I said, even if it's something that ideally would take 3 hours to do well, if I have that pressure and I only have a half an hour, I'm gonna get it done.
right,
Now,
right,
would it have been done a little bit better if I had a little bit more time? Yeah, absolutely. But
right.
I'll get it done in that half hour. It's just.
This is the
But
only
the amount
thing.
of stress that comes with it is like
Too much.
too
It's like,
much.
but it's funny because it's like that's how we go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth all the time. When I was coming up with Win Your Hour, the reason it's an hour is that actually longer than an hour is too long. It's like if I have an hour and 30 minutes, I'll start at the hour mark. If I have 2 hours, I'll start, you know what I mean? It's always like that. Whereas for some reason, I have stuck a post in my brain that I know what an hour is. So I've now taught myself, I trained myself what an hour is. And so then you do tasks in there and then you get surprised, like, oh, I can do the kitchen in an hour. And then you do it, day by day, you keep doing it, and you're like, oh, it takes 20 minutes focused. You know what I mean? It takes 20 minutes, maybe 35 if you have to load the dishwasher. But like that's how long it takes. And previously it was just, oh, I can't do that. There's so much to do. Look at how untidy it is. Like, what do you? So there really is I was actually when I was writing the workshop, I realized that while there are steps and a process, just the most important thing is your mindset and being kind to yourself and learning as you go. It's a process. So I feel like to-do lists, while they're great and they're a valuable tool for some, because they will sit there, they will write them, they will carry them with them. They'll like, I've had tiny books before, and I've gone, well, if I write them all in a tiny book. But it's a separate thing if then you're out in the world and you're doing and you're busy and your to-do list is not somewhere in your vision. It's back on the table or back on the chair or back on the couch wherever it was before. And that separation is too much for me. Then my to-do list is like I have many of them. I have hundreds of thousands of them, but I've probably not done all the things on them.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, I had a thought while you were talking, and now it escaped me. So I'm gonna go back to our notes here.
Okay.
Um, let's talk about the concept of how, like, the brain does this thing of like, what's next? What's next? What's next? And I've experienced that some days that what's next keeps me on task. Like if I'm having a particularly focused, productive day,
Yeah.
I can stay on task. Now, two things can throw me off. If there's too many things on that what's next list, or if somebody distracts me when I'm repeating the list in my head. Like I do this thing where when while I'm moving throughout the day, if I'm trying to be really productive, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to do this. And then from there, I'm going to go here. I'm going to do that. And I'm going through this in my head as I'm moving throughout the house, throughout my day. And if somebody comes in and wants to talk to me about something totally unrelated to my list, suddenly I'm completely thrown. I don't know where I am on my list, and I'm frustrated and overwhelmed again. What what is your experience with that, and what would you say to someone who either is overwhelmed by the what's next, what's next, what's next, and feels like that's just pushing them too much, or gets thrown because somebody interrupted their what's next list?
I think I can answer that in reverse. I studied meditation for a while. Did some of those weekend courses where you would go and you'd meditate for whole days. Um, and I thought it was brilliant. It was a brilliant thing for my brain. It took like half the day for my brain to stop distracting me, or for me to be able to ignore my brain and then get into meditation. But it was thoroughly worth it. And they talked about the multiple types of boredom that we have, right? There are lots of different types of being bored. There are lots of different types of doing nothing. Um, and one of them is not focusing on yourself and focusing on other people, right? So it's like you can have a busy day, you can have a productive day, you can have a really big day, but actually are all those tasks that you're doing for other people? So it is a micro version of what we did at work. It's sort of like, okay, so then my partner will be my boss, or my kids will be my boss, or even more backhandedly, my brain will make doing something for them the most important thing to do right now. So it's like if we were to say good procrastination and bad procrastination would be watching Netflix, whereas good procrastination would be making my children's beds. Like I don't need to make my kids' beds. They're 5 and 7. They can and should make their own beds. But you give me a big task to have to do, especially like studying with a blank page. You give me anything with a blank page to start on, and I will be the most productive person doing every other thing that I could do that isn't for me, right? That isn't. It's like, oh, and it's even a nugget if I can do it for myself, and I'll be like, well, and I will, well, I should really tidy this basement. You know what I mean? There's always these things that we can do. So I think there's something that's almost in the brain that's almost you know, it must help with dopamine or something to help other people, right? It's like I'm going to help them, and that's great, and that feels good, and 100% we should do that. But as you say, the challenge is that for some of us, it derails us, And then it becomes, okay, this is my primary task. I'm going to do this primary task. Okay, after that primary task, I've deserved a rest. I'm going to have a rest now. Okay. 3 hours later, oh, wait, hold on. What was I meant to do today? Oh, or even worse, when you get into bed at the end of the day and you're like, oh, shoot, I didn't do the thing I was supposed to do, even if it was on my list. So I'm always I started with that kind of interest in mind of like, why is it that why do we have these different levels in our brains that if someone else needs something externally, we will prioritize it, but if we need something internally, we won't. And it's probably because when we need something externally, it's more black and white. Can you do this task? I can do this task. I do this task. Whereas when we're doing something for ourselves, I think it gets a lot more complex in our brains because, like, can I do this task? Well, what is the task? Is there a way to do this task really easily? Is there a way to do this task to the best quality ever? Is it worth starting this task right now if I can't finish this task? You know what I mean? Your mind just goes all these ways around it, and then it starts to prep, and it's like, well, in order to need to do this, I need this thing, and I don't have this thing, so I can't do it, right? So that's like that rabbit hole that you go down at the end ends with you sort of thinking, okay, this thing is a mammoth task that's going to take so much energy, and I don't have energy now. I'm going to go and put my energy on something else that's a smaller, quick win or is less discomfort. So it really is a game, I think, of working with your mind and your mindset.
Yeah. And I think it's so important to learn how it is that your brain works because everybody's brain is unique.
Yes.
We have a lot of things in common that we can share and but our brains are also unique. And so it's like taking one of the biggest things I would say is taking what works, like trying different tactics that different people have to share
Yeah,
and seeing what sticks for you, what works.
exactly.
And what I really love about the Win Your Hour is like like you said, you're taking that task that feels like a mammoth task, right? Like for
Yeah,
me, it's editing these podcasts, right? It's like I
yeah,
have to sit down and edit, and it's like there's so many steps to editing. There's learning the software and how to do the different steps. And it feels like, oh my goodness, this is going to take like all week. I don't have the skills. I need to take a course, whatever, like
yeah,
all
yeah.
these things that come in and go, oh, I can't do it. But the concept of Win Your Hour and just breaking it into just, okay, well, I'm just going to sit down and
Right.
learn whatever I can and do whatever I can in 1 hour. Next
That's
thing
it.
I know, the entire day's gone by.
Right, right.
And
And you
I've
like
been
go
editing
zoom
all day and I've actually gotten something done.
because I feel
And
like
it's not all done, but I've
right.
gotten a chunk done. And I'm like, oh, maybe I can actually do this.
That's it. That's it. Suddenly your brain, you're showing your brain, you can do it, and it's not going to can. And then you start getting the dopamine hits for chunking up and doing small things. It's like I'm going to edit this podcast. Okay, I'm going to get rid of all the filler words. I'm going to get rid of all the ums. I'm going to do that, right? And all right, I'm going to do that in an hour. And then you do it, and it takes 8 minutes, and you feel great, right? So you're like, oh, I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to keep going, and keep going. And so I think that's great to kind of go to that point of expansion, but also be able to say to yourself, like, okay, well, if it doesn't, if I didn't get it done, or if it's going to take more than 2 hours, at least I started. And so I always think that's the case. And we knew that coming off of our course again together is like absolutely starting is better than waiting to start and when you're ready. If you wait until you're ready, you'll never start. You've just got to start.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like you've got to put down a first draft and then walk away and then come back and play with it. And that again, as we say, for my mind, that works. I can like worry about something for a really long time and I could struggle with it, or I can just say, oh, I'm going to do a first pass. And that actually is what happened with even doing this presentation. It was a struggle.
Oh, I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, it's interesting because it was the same thing that my son recommended to me because he used to do podcasts and things, and he said he had a friend who was coming to him and asking him for input and how to do these things and stuff, and she wanted to have the whole process laid out perfectly before getting started, and he kept telling her, "You just got to start." And
Right.
that's what he was like, "Mom, if you want to do it, just do it." Don't worry about it being perfect because it's never going to be perfect. You're never going to know enough to do it perfectly until you start. Like that's how you're going to learn is
Yep.
just start doing it. And yeah, and that's why the bite-sized pieces help so much because you just do a little something and then you get a success and you're like, "Oh, okay. Now
Yeah.
I know what's next." Or now I see that I can do this thing and and maybe it's not as overwhelming as I thought it was.
Right. Exactly. It's really interesting because, I think right now, some of the buzzwords that people say is like the opposite of anxiety is action. I truly believe that, right? And it's almost like, the opposite of overwhelm would be to, look at the list that you've got, realistically look at the list that you've got, right? And that's probably again a really hard leap to make at the time that you're overwhelmed, right? It's like, oh, you know what would help me right now is if I wrote everything down and then went through it and then prioritized it and then found a time and did all doing that while you're overwhelmed could be nigh impossible, right? Because you're basically asking your brain, you're like, I'm intimidated by whatever I've put behind this door of productivity. And now what you're asking me to do is to throw open the door and throw myself into that room and look at everything I could possibly do. No, no, that just sounds like bad juju. So it's much more so partly with when you're out, when I was going through it, it's like there are some set times to do some things, and there's like it was interesting because I think there's a process and some steps to go through. But again, I found that the mindset layer at each step was super important as well. So for instance, when I'm coming up with this list, with my initial list, I'm doing that on a Monday morning, right? When I'm checking the list, I'm doing it on Friday. And that's my first hour that I'm winning is I'm going to spend an hour creating a list of everything that I have to do, right? And it's in the calendar, it's what I'm going to do. I just know, and that's the hour I have to win, and I'm going to get this list. And it's not a moment of overwhelm, right? And because even getting into that task and doing it because it's 9 a.m., like I start to see, well, what do I have on this list? Like, what is it? How can I see everything I have to do, and how overwhelming is it truly?
I like that when you shared about that in your course was that the concept of being really realistic and kind to yourself about your list too and prioritizing. I remember you had an acronym, Moscow.
Moscow, that's it.
Yeah.
Moscow. It comes from project
And
management.
right. And it the must do, the should do, um,
Could do,
the could do, and
won't do.
then the won't do. And I think I particularly loved the won't do
Yes.
because because it was like you have permission to say, actually, this doesn't have a high enough priority for me to even think about it.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So it comes from project management, the idea of Moscow. So when a client has a bunch of features they want to put in an app or something, it allows you to basically prioritize because everybody wants everything and you can't have everything. I'm sorry. Um, and so I started applying it to myself. And what I realized is, you would have these big lists of. So the way you break it down is, yes, as you said, musts. So must do's are the inflexible things. I have a deadline. I have to do this thing by Wednesday. I have to pay this parking ticket today, or it's gonna charge me 80. It's gonna go from $80 to $100, whatever it is, right? You have to do that thing. Pick your kids up from school. You know that you have to do that thing at that time, or all hell breaks loose. The challenge is that you then have under that, you have some more flexible tasks that are should tasks, right? Like I should do these things. If I have the time, I should do them. It would really help. It would help me get ahead of the game. It would help me be, more ready for next week. It would help me be more ready for my workshop or whatever. And they kind of move around because they're flexible and they can start to get, pushed down the list. Then you get your could do's, and your could do's are your nice to haves, right? I could do this. I could do this. If I've done all my musts and I've done all my shoulds, I could do all of this stuff. You know what I mean? And it's fun things. Like, so for me, go through and reorder my comics. I could go through and reorder my comics. It's a fun thing to do, but it is not anywhere near important or urgent. right? There's no need to do that. And but that's the thing. I'll find myself doing it and it'll be like, oh, why? And even then I'm like, why am I doing something that's a could? And the minute that comes in, then as I mentioned with the brain, you've kind of programmed yourself because you're like, okay, so in this moment I have a decision. Am I going to finish this could because it feels good and then do something on my list? I'm going to acknowledge it. I'm going to know that I'm doing it. And even better than that is when you get something that goes to a could and just doesn't get done. Right. And so finally, after 2 weeks or 3 weeks of going through and reviewing over and over again, because really the most important part is then to do the check on Friday and to see how well you did, or to do the check on Sunday and see how well you did. And to then say to yourself, look, this item recataloguing my comics, I'm just not going to do it. Right? I have so many musts to do. I have so many shoulds to do. I have could. It's not even going to be a could on my list because it really is not as important as all these other things that I've got to do. Um, and so what I wanted to do is I want to celebrate that rather than people, be mean at themselves and say, oh man, I can't believe I won't get something done, or I'm admitting I won't get something done. And you flip the mindset to being like, thankfully, I'm taking things off my list. Look at all the things I'm not going to do. Look at the things I'm not going to have time to do. And so again, if I catch myself doing them, like, why? Why am I doing this? This is on my not to do list. And there's nothing I think that is better than a nice not to do list. That's fantastic.
Oh, I love that. And I love that you brought up the concept of celebration because that was another thing that I wanted to talk about because you were reminding me the other day to stop and celebrate also when you get something done.
Right.
So, but I love that you're also suggesting that we celebrate when we take something off the list and recognize that it's not important enough to be on the list.
Right. It's hugely important and it feels like a huge win because we are making a conscious decision not to do something. And if you think about a time of overwhelm, right, it can happen in overwhelm where you're just saying, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to do that, almost mindlessly as opposed to mindfully, right? And you're just sort of pushing things away. But I really love the fact that you can move this into something conscious and you can say to yourself, no, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that this week. Maybe I'll do it next week, but it's not going to come back onto my list. Um, I even had a challenge when thinking about calling this win your hour because the opposite of a win is a loss. And but I didn't want that because I wanted the other statement, which is, if it's not a win and you learn something, then that's a win, right? Basically, it's only a loss if you don't win the hour, you don't do whatever task you thought you were going to do, um, and you're then looking backwards. But then learning, like, why? Why didn't I do that, right? I scheduled myself to clean the kitchen. So for myself, yeah, I scheduled myself to clean the kitchen, at 9 p.m. That's what I would do. That would be the last hour I would try and win in a day. Um, and I it was on my list for the longest time. And it was a must, and then it became a should, and then I had a conversation with my partner, and it became a must again. And it was at the wrong time of day, basically. You put the kids down, and I'm at the age where they're 5 and 7, and so I put one of them to bed at night. My wife puts another one to bed, and you kind of go there and they're small and you sleep. You're in their beds with them and you're singing songs and you get to this really peaceful moment where they fall asleep. And then you get out of that space and you're like, oh, now I've got to clean the kitchen. And for me, it was a bridge too far. It was like just too far. But what happened then was I said, this is important though. This is something that I want to do. Like I could do it. So I also had a 9 a.m. as one of my win the hours. And so I would move it to 9 a.m. and started to be more successful with that task at 9 a.m. than I was at 9 p.m. And so there was a learning. And again, I felt like, oh, I feel fantastic. What a winner I am. Look at me cleaning the kitchen at 9 a.m. What a legend.
That's fantastic. So, on this point of celebrating, it sounds like it's really important to celebrate when you move something off your to-do list, celebrate when you complete a task, and celebrate when you failed to complete a task, but then you learned something and were later able to complete the
Yeah.
task.
Yeah. All of
So
it.
let's just talk about the celebration.
Right.
because I really think that that's something that most of us fail to take the time to really celebrate and reward ourselves
Yeah.
in some kind of way for our wins and just acknowledging that it is a win to learn something,
Yes.
to say no to something,
Yeah.
you
It,
know, let alone we don't even celebrate half the time when we actually do achieve something.
exactly. Exactly. And I didn't. I don't know if this is ADHD or anything else or anything else, but just my normal habits. But um, I do not celebrate wins. Generally, I do not celebrate wins. What I do is I get really into a task. It's something I have to do. I have to get it done. I get it done, and then I'm like, okay, it's done. Move on to the next thing. And I've done this on many different scales. It's like you work with a team that delivers a 6 month project, and it's like really great. It goes live, and everybody else is like high-fiving and relaxed. And for me, I would always be like, all right, great. When I get to 11, I'm going home because I am tired and this thing is done. And I didn't want to celebrate. I just wanted to be like, now what are the next problems I'm thinking of and what are the next things to solve? So celebration was very important to me, because I needed, as you said, I need to remind myself, like, it's, more than just a dopamine hit and feel, but like mentally saying, great, you're doing a good job. Like you feel great. I mentioned in the course that nothing, nothing makes me feel better than being a legend than when I'm listening to like Tupac and Biggie Smalls and putting away the laundry. Right, it is, and so it's like a little gift to myself, a little bonus that I get. It's like I'm putting together all these socks or whatever, but I love the tunes that are going on, and I love doing it. And that was fantastic. And in fact, I was actually inspired there. So if I take you through that journey for a sec, so I love doing the laundry. I've always loved just doing the laundry. It's like there are piles of things, and I can put them in the machine, and I press the right button, and then they all come out clean, and I put them in the dryer, and they all come out dry. It's very, to me, it's just like such a good task doing the laundry. And then, I again talked to my partner one day, and she's like, yeah, yeah, you do the laundry. I was like, what's that? And she's like, what? It's like, what's wrong? And she went, well, you do the laundry, but you don't put it away. And so that was really good for me as a productive person to say, hold on, there's two tasks there. One task that I see as the joyous one, which is doing the laundry, and the other one, which is painful, which is putting the laundry away. And so that's where when you're our help, because then I broke down do the laundry into two parts. One part is do the laundry, and the other part is put it away. And what was actually funny with my wife is like it took a few weeks for her to get the confidence that I was going to put the laundry away. And I'd be like, no, 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 don't. She would see it and she'd be like, oh, and I'd be like, no, 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 don't do it. I'm doing that at 8:15 tomorrow morning. She's like, what? Yeah, I'm doing that at 8:15 tomorrow morning after I clean the kitchen. And then she sort of like looks at you like, oh, are you going to? But like, and I did because I'd realized something I hadn't realized before. My brain had completely shut off one task from another because one of them gave me joy and the other one gave me dread.
Got you. Yeah. And and so part of your celebration is listening to music that pumps you up while you're doing something that you don't enjoy, but
Yes,
now you enjoy it because you're listening to music
that
that you enjoy.
that was the learning. It was the learning. It was like, well, how can I make this better? How can I do better here? And Alexa is my other wife, and so I literally take many like I have lots of reminders and things like that all the time. Um, and so it's really great to have something else that's going to remind you of, hey, you've got this thing coming up in 30 minutes. I've got to win the hour coming up in 30 minutes. So great, it actually becomes great. Did you see that? In my mind, I was like, great. In an hour, I'm going to win an hour by doing something. I'm going to look at my list and see what I can win. And one of the great nuggets that I got from Mel Robbins was playlists. Lots of psychology-backed information she's got over multiple years. Music really does key us up, really does take us to places. It's if you get a playlist that's full of high energy, high beat music, we get up, we get hyper, we get hype. Um, Alternative, you could have like a throwback good mood, which is like, oh, these are the songs I remember from my 20s, and like this is when I was chilling. This is when I was having a good time. This is like, maybe in the club tracks, just like a little bit smoother. And so I think that's been very integral to my productivity because I'll be in bed or I'll be on the couch or I'll be in this chair and then I will just say her name and play my LFG playlist, shuffle my LFG playlist so something new comes on from the playlist and then the beats start coming up and then I start there's no way I can sit during that moment. I got to move. I got to excite. And so what happens afterwards, my celebration is when I'll be like, okay, now put my throwback good mood playlist. Now I'm chilling. That's what I'm doing now. I'm chilling. I don't need the beats per minute anymore.
I love that. I love that. And that's the whole concept of taking a minute to celebrate is where the habit of having the like, okay, now what's next? What's next? Becomes a I don't want to say a problem, but like can lead to burnout, I
Right.
think, when you don't take a minute to celebrate because there's no, okay, so let me just share what happened to me recently.
Please.
I started this process and I thought it was brilliant and I was sharing it with everybody and it was working really well for a couple of weeks. I had a journal where I was writing because I'm scared of to-do lists and how they might not get done if I write them down. I decided that at night I'm going to say, I'm proud of myself for these things, right? And it's interesting because, in one sense, that was a way of celebrating the things that I got done,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
was like celebrating them all at once at the end of the day.
Right.
And then I would also make a list of things I was grateful for to stay in a gratefulness mindset. And it was working great for a couple of weeks, but I was getting more and more productive. And here's what my crazy brain did was it was like, okay, so these lists are going to get longer and longer, and I'm going to get more productive and more productive. And I wasn't celebrating the small stuff anymore. I was celebrating how long my list was of
Yeah.
things that I got done. And so then when I had one day where I wasn't very productive and I only got one thing done, I was like, I don't have enough to write on my list today. And there went the lists. I
Right.
haven't written in my journal since. And
Right.
I keep
One.
telling myself I'm going to go back to it. But it was like I was putting an unreasonable expectation on myself to continue to increase productivity. Like what, indefinitely? Like
Right.
someday I'm just going to be like a god doing all the things
Yeah.
all the time, right?
It's like that Superman in Superman 3 when the lady gets sucked into the machine and she becomes a robot and she's like, I'm now the most productive machine I could be. It's it's really interesting because as you know, as a coach, we go through something called the Wheel of Life. So we look at different segments of life and how you're feeling about the different segments and how satisfied you are with the different segments of your life, and be they family, friends, relationship, working, career, fun, purpose, any of those. And we do this interesting exercise with folks where we start with where they are right now and how satisfied they feel, and then we say, where do you want to get to? And there's an interesting thing with some people who are just like five, 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 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. Right? What do I want? It's like, well, I want everything. I want to be 10 on everything. And I cannot imagine a life where I was like 10 at everything all the time. Right? It just wouldn't be joyous to me. I think you'd just be a machine going from one thing to another to another. And that I think again is where overwhelm comes in. Right? Especially if you're not prioritizing things like fun. You know what I mean? Like I actually had to do that at one point. I put do Legos, you know what I mean? Rather than TV, do Legos or do puzzles or do something that you really enjoy. But for goodness sakes, don't just do TV. And once I had that, it really worked. I will also tell you the opposite, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
So journaling, um, it's like it's it's a blue pill, right? It's like, here, take the blue pill. If you journal, it will really help you. It will really help you mentally. It'll help with your mental. It'll help you find out what's going on with you. It'll help you, really tap into what's going on. And what I did, I translated all of that to like journaling. That's a big thing. So journaling was number one on my list of things to do for I think 2 months. And it was like, I've got to journal, I've got to journal, I've got to journal. And the great thing is that for those 2 months, I was having my accountability calls. And then again, my accountability partner would be like, so it's how was that last week? Did you journal? Like, no. It's like, okay, well, why do you need to journal? Is it mandatory? And I was like, well, it will help, but it could be done or could not be done. And so it was that mindset that was a challenge until finally it was basically until finally she said to me, okay, let's take it off the list. Let's take it off and put it in the won'ts because it's not helping you having it be there in your won'ts. And so I stopped and I was like, oh man, if I'm actually going to do that and make that big jump, that's a shame. Like, what could I do? So then I broke it down. I was like, well, what do I need to do this task? Well, to journal, I need a pen and I need a piece of paper by my bed. And so I did that. And as I mentioned in my course, it was a completely transformational journey because I became someone who watched Netflix with a book and a piece of paper beside their bed, and that was it. It just didn't. I didn't touch it. I didn't touch it for a long time. It did nothing. It did nothing except for doing. But actually, what happened was I got rid of the barriers in my mind, and so then I started to just say to myself at night when I would see it, it's like I'm just going to write a word. I'm going to write fine. And so I wrote the word anxious or I would write, or I would write grateful, or I would write happy, or something. And then the pad got open, and then there was stuff on it, and it was no longer a blank piece of paper. And so I could go back to it without feeling the guilt again. And so I call that
Mm.
jotting rather than journaling. So, because then journaling, at least for me in my mind, just became this big thing of like, how much do I have to write? And I have to write a page a day. And what if I don't have anything to say? And all those what ifs. Whereas whereas with jotting, it's like, hey, if I can get to the piece of paper and write a word, that's great. Right. And the number of times I've ended up writing a page or a page and a half or whatever, and it's sort of tapped into what's really going on and made it much more frequent practice. Isn't an every night practice? No, but it's a more frequent practice than it was before. That's
I
the win.
love that. I love that. And I think when we break it down into the smallest possible pieces, it takes away a lot of the overwhelm.
Yeah.
When we celebrate the learning, the removal of tasks, in addition to celebrating the productivity, it takes away so much of the pressure that makes things feel overwhelming. And it acknowledges all the pieces of what's going on
Yeah. Yeah.
and makes it so much more realistic and doable. And I absolutely love that. In fact, I'm writing down jotting here because I think I'm going to try that as a way to open up my journal again
Yeah.
and just write something,
Just anything. Like
anything. And if I don't write something one day, that doesn't mean I can't write something the next day.
right, exactly. Just a word, I wonder how many words you'd get on a page until you got to like a whole until you got to a whole page of words. No, how many words you do one by one until you were like finally ready, and then it basically popped off, and suddenly it was my phone, and I was doing it during the day and making notes and making journals, and like this is what I want to do, and it really does build. And it's something like, again, you get to that bar, you reach it, and then you find a way to go over it. You find a way to get started, and once you do that, then the momentum helps you kind of trick yourself into being like, okay, yeah, I'm getting dopamine hits from doing this task, which is phenomenal.
So it's a way of, if I'm saying this correctly, it's a way of prioritizing those things that really are the most important to you
Yeah.
and being kind to yourself and realistic with yourself by making things bite-sized and reasonable.
Right, right. But it's, as with most things, the secret's in the source. So what I found is that there's a wrapper all around this, which is about the mindset and being curious or judgmental, right? And as
Ah,
we know, a great lead in from our friend Ted Lasso there about being curious and judgmental. And so one of the tactical tips I have is there's some really powerful words that you can use for yourself, like yet and why. So if we start with a trigger word like realistic, as you mentioned, what is realistic to you is not realistic to me, right? What is realistic for everybody is different. But one of it then becomes one of these hammers that we hit ourselves with. It's like, well,
mm,
realistic is their measure, not mine. We don't get, I say that, we have 24 hours in a day. We don't get 24 usable hours in a day, right? Not even Beyonce gets 24 usable hours a day. Like some of them are just going to go to the wayside. Some of them are going to go to sleep. Like you need to rest. You need to enjoy. You're not a robot. And so what I found at that time, so was when it was doing journaling, I got stuck with the I don't journal. I don't like journaling. I don't know why. It's I'm not a journaler, right? There's all these full stop statements that I would say that became limiting beliefs that I was holding myself back with. And so tactically, a way you can deal with that is to reformat that sentence with a yet and then look at the why. So I don't like journaling became I haven't journaled yet. Okay. Okay. So then I haven't journaled yet. And then why? Why haven't I journaled yet? And that's when it was like, well, I don't have a piece of paper by my bed. I don't have a pen by my bed. All right. Then let's do those things and see what happens. Let's see if that builds the momentum. And that comes from moving from a judgmental place to a curious place. And that is, again, very difficult to do when you're in the moment. And so that's kind of why it's good when you're like 9 o'clock on a Monday, I'm going to look at it, or 5 o'clock on a Friday, I'm going to see how I did. But I'm going to bring curiosity and not judgment to this. Because if I bring judgment, I'm not going to learn anything. I'm just going to reiterate what I am telling my brain already. Right. The alternative to that is like with curiosity and thinking about yet and thinking about why, I am actually asking questions that my brain, the problem solver, can chew on and get back into rather than sort of turning its face away.
I love that. Um, to wrap up, as we don't have a lot of time left here,
Okay.
I would like to, first of all, thank you so much for all your wonderful insights and the the mindset shift that you have shared with us is so key and so important. And you've broken it down in a very understandable and usable way. I would like our listeners to know how to contact you if they would like to take your workshop or get one-on-one coaching with you. Can you share your contact information with us?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. So I am available at marshallcoach.me. That's my site. I am Marshall Coaching at Marshall Coaching on Instagram, and you can find me there. I also have a Win Your Hour page that I'm setting up on Instagram. That's where I'm going to put tips and tricks, and I'm also going to be putting up the workshop as a webinar too, so that people can go and get there. And then I'm available as a coach because, again, I think the process side of Win Your Hour is one thing, like what are the steps, but the mindset is the key, and what that unpacks for you and dealing and managing what happens when that unpacks for you is super important.
And
Um,
how can you help as a coach with that piece of it?
well, because I think the why, the yet and the why are very hard to do by ourselves.
Mm.
The breaking ourselves out of overwhelm is very hard to do by ourselves, which is why I always say that the first thing you need is an accountability partner, who ironically can't be your partner because you are accountable to them. So they're always going to, they're going to be like, well, this is a must not. And you're like, No, you can't do that. So accountability partner is great for that back and forth. But even with an accountability partner, they'll stay at level one, which is like, you didn't do this. Are you going to do it? Like, when are you going to do it? Right? Which is when you then get stuck with the why. Okay, but I haven't done it yet. Why haven't I done it? Why is this triggering me? And I think that's where a coach is best, right? Because then you start to say, like, well, these are limiting beliefs that are telling me that even if I do this task, there's a harder task ahead. Or even if I do this task, it's not going to be great or it's not going to be really interesting. Or, I am a procrastinator as opposed to I have the procrastination habit. So that's why things don't get done.
Mm.
And and I think this might be my own thing where um, I think that people with ADHD right now, there's so much talk about ADHD, but I feel like that people with ADHD are the canaries in the coal mine in this digital age, in this centralized digital age. Like I feel like some company somewhere has, 50 ADHD people in a room and is showing them apps and watching what rabbit holes they go down. But really, we live in a world now where there is literally it's you're trying to get stuff done, and there is a $1 trillion industry trying to distract you, making it easy to be distracting. When I was working on digital and the digital side and apps and working on that, we talked about friction. We want to remove friction. We want to make it really easy for people to subscribe, to like, to share. And that's great, but it also means that like we're taking out anything that might give you a moment of, wait, how long have I been doing this? Wait, why am I doing this? Wait, why am I, and so I don't want people just to think like, oh, I'm a procrastinator. It's like you have a habit and there is there is a dealer on the corner who is more than willing to give you something to distract you whenever you want.
Love
Got
that.
dark in the end, but okay.
I love that analogy though. It's so true. It's not the dealer isn't even in the court on the corner. The dealer is in our back pocket
That's it.
or like
Yeah.
right in front of us on the table. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's that's so real.
Right. And when I came, and especially as an entrepreneur, solo entrepreneur, what I realized is that my phone, for me, its primary reason is connection. And I've gone from working in offices and working with lots of people to working on my own. And so my phone becomes really important because what if someone calls me or if someone texts me? And I could tell you that's 1% of what I do with my phone. If I get a text, then an hour later I'm here. I have a horrible story, and then we can go. I was in Amsterdam. It was my 50th birthday, and I was sitting there, and like 25 people had flown over to come and hang out with me, which was like the most joyous thing I could think about. And I was sitting at the dinner table, and I was like, "Hey, there are concert tickets going on sale for this thing next week." And then my wife and my best friend were like, "What are you doing? How are you possibly on your phone right now?" And I felt really annoyed. I felt really indignant. I was like, hold on. The reason I was on my phone was because, I was looking for the 25th person and they're not here yet. And so I checked my text to see if I'd seen anything. And they're like, yep. And then I checked Instagram to see if I'd heard anything. They were like, yep. And then I scrolled on Instagram for 20 minutes, for like 5, 10 minutes. And they were like, yep. And then I told you about these concerts. They're like, do you not see, like, I'm describing the thing as if it wasn't a problem because I was indignant. It's like, how dare you be angry at me for just looking for connection? It's like, well, it's because 25 minutes later you were telling us about concert tickets that really were not important.
Right. And that was a whole 25 minutes that you weren't present to the
Yeah.
people that were right in front of you there to celebrate your birthday with you.
Yeah, yeah. It was a good learning moment. It was a good learning moment.
Yeah, that's so real. Unfortunately, I'm sure we've all been there at some point. Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I would like to encourage all of our listeners to share in the comments a win that they've had, even if it's a win of getting something off your to-do list, if it's a win of being kind to yourself, if it's a win of being productive, or if it's a win of investing in yourself and signing up for some coaching.
Yes. That one I would
Let's,
say definitely do.
yeah,
Definitely do that one. Yeah, and treat yourself with kindness. And we only have so many productive hours in a day, and really win your hour is about finding the tasks that you have to do for yourself and other people finding the hours that you have available, selecting, the minimum amount of them as you go, and then doing them and either winning that hour or learning. And that's it. And then you just keep doing that process over and again until you learn and maybe even program your brain that to thoroughly clean the kitchen will take me 25 minutes, not all day, not 2 hours, not like it's not a nightmare. It will take me 25 minutes. I now know that I've programmed my brain.
It's great. So you can go from feeling like it's all too much to
Right.
feeling like, what did you say? When you're putting away the socks, you feel like
Yeah, I feel like a legend. I feel like an absolute
right.
legend. I feel like
You,
an absolute legend. I'm like, look, yes, yes. I'm like, yes. All my OGs out here rocking out, putting away socks.
awesome. Thank you so
Cool.
much, Robert. It's been
Thank you
such
for
a
moving things
pleasure,
along.
and I look forward to doing this again with you in the near future.
Okay, all right. Take care. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, absolutely.